Well, hello, everybody. It's December 19th, 2022, just a week or so to go before we close this year out. I'm Andy Johnson. You're looking at WESN. As we begin this week's programming, we're talking about AM Prime on this day, at this time. Let's just tell you what's happening over the course of the next hour and a half or so. We will be talking with Mr. Rishi Maharaj. He's an advocate for disclosure of public information, or information that a lot of us believe should be in the public domain. It has to do with the situation regarding the government's attempt to lay in Parliament matters having to do with the firearms users license report. There's some people who call for it, others who are on the other side. We will talk with Mr. Maharaj about that. He's run an organization called Disclosure Today, among other things. We're also talking with a gentleman whose story was featured in the Newsday a couple of days ago. He said that being in prison in the United States saved his life. His name is Kenrick Richardson. We'll tell you some of his story as we go along on this edition of the program. But right now with us, security expert Commander Gavin Hira. You remember, let me just remind you what this is about. Look at this headline in the Newsday a couple of days ago. I didn't want to lose more lives. A very emotional testimony provided by this gentleman at the continuing inquiry as to what went wrong with Paria and the diving and so on. Could that have been saved? Could that have been prevented? And could it have been worse? That is what he is alleging, why he took some of the decisions that he took, or led in the decision makings as they happened on that matter. Paria Fuel Trading Company's terminal operations manager Colin Piper said Paria did not possess the competence needed to review the scope of works presented to them by the company contracted by them, LMCS, for the job being done at the berth 6 at Point of Pierre. He was giving eagerly anticipated testimony last Wednesday during the Commission of Inquiry into what happened on February 25th, a tragedy it has been called, taking place at the International Waterfront Center. With us, as we see, Commander Gavin Hira. Good to see you.
Morning. Morning, Andy. Morning to you and to the team and to those who are streaming online. A very pleasant good morning. And I know some of us are either licking our wounds this morning or raising our hands in triumph from a very entertaining World Cup final yesterday. So to all the France fans, a job well done, brought it to the end. And to the Argentinian fans, a job well done again with displaying what we will call the triumph of the greatest game. It was indeed an entertaining final. So good morning, Andy, and I'm happy.
So who was yours? I mean, I could tell you that I'd supported France, but I think it was one of the most fabulous contests in any sport that I've ever seen.
It goes down in history as one of the best, if not the greatest. To be quite truthful, I didn't have any specific team. I like good football. I like to see good football, and there were two evenly contested teams, and it displayed that. So yesterday I took a neutral view to be entertained with good football, and so I was.
Yeah.
Yes.
Eventually that it was. I mean, like I said, it was one of the most fabulous contests I've ever seen. And
great moments of football. Yeah. Excellent. Yeah.
All right, so let's get to this matter. One of the things I wanted to get at is you're looking at the testimony the other day with Mr. Piper in the stand, and he kept asking the people who were questioning him, and I want to talk a little bit about that, because I think the chairman of the proceedings sort of intervened at a point in that questioning to say that it was not an interrogation. This thing is about trying to find out what happened, how it might have been prevented. But you look at the performance of some of the attorneys there, they were going at it in a kind of way that they had to be warned. It wasn't about that. It was a fact-finding mission. But coming to the point about making the call, which what struck me, he was saying that he saw danger already taking place and taking shape. And anybody in his position, he was saying, which one of you would have liked to have been there to send more people into a danger zone that you know is a danger zone? That was a hard call to make, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was two things before we actually kick off into the conversation itself. Remember, it's a commission of inquiry. It's still in progress, and there are a number of witnesses being called, and an investigation aspect of it is in full-fledged. So we will have to tread lightly on how we talk about this, because I don't want to contravene or compromise what is taking place in that space. But we can speak basically on the existence of what we have been hearing, and share a conversation this morning for the edification of our citizens, and more importantly, adding that sort of expert conversation that shows an observation is taking place, and we're seeing this, we're hearing this, that type of stuff. It's very important to understand what is a commission of inquiry. And a commission of inquiry, as we know, is appointed by a government when something of grave national interest has happened or has taken place. And it's an investigative process. It's a fact-finding process, just as you alluded to. Three things are key in a commission of inquiry is being established or appointed, and that is one, the terms of reference. More importantly, what are the objectives of this commission of inquiry? What are going to be our objectives at the end of this? And of course, the stated timeline or time space that is given for the what we call the submission of a report. And important to that report would be recommendations. So it is not prosecutorial, not before the courts, you're not a charge or whatever. It is in fact a fact-finding mission where you overturn stones, and you look for information that can produce meaningful recommendations that will support decision making going forward. That's very important. So back to what you said, yes, I believe there has been some aggression. I see a lot of aggressiveness. To some extent, if I had liberty to say so, maybe some badgering of how people were questioned, but that is just style and approach, and we don't want to go there because those guys are certified and they're professionals, and we don't want to question on what is being done, but maybe voice from a neutral position on how it is being done. So yeah, it is in fact one that is worth penning onto paper as to what are some of our observations, and it is understanding that in all of this there's something called incident command systems or incident command management, and when Mr. Piper made his declarations, he was speaking basically on behalf of PARI and some of the decisions that they were making based on their readiness or lack of readiness to treat with what was taking place.
Yeah, there's a quote from him here. He says it was as if all it took was, quote, sending a man and pulling him out with a rope. He said, the report said his voice broke as he said people's husbands, sons, and fathers were in that pipeline. And I understand Mr. Kerban is one of the persons there, courage because his father was in the pipe. Mr. Kerban is their man who said he wanted to go back in because his father was in there. And Mr. Piper is saying, I understand that, why he would want to go back in. And if I was a son, I may have taken the same position, but I've also looked at this on the reverse. If I was the father in that pipe, would I want somebody to send my son into that pipe after me in a reckless manner where he could perish? And he was saying, on top of that, he was saying that some of those who were clamoring to go in, they were doing so from essentially an emotional position, and one has to make a call as to whether that is the correct environment to be in. And if you make the assessment that this may not derive the result that you want, it's a call you have to make, and that's what he was saying. That's what he was trying to get over.
So he's speaking from a perspective of being advised or being guided by professionals. I am assuming.
Yes.
Let me start with, I'm assuming he's speaking from a position of being advised and being guided by professionals, by a group of strategic thinkers who deal with incidents or risk or threats within his platform, his piece. And if we were to just look at it in a reality situation, when it comes to lives of family members or co-workers or people who we are close to, we have a relationship to, and there's a situation, there's a certain amount of adrenaline and enthusiasm and almost a blatant disregard for safety, just to get in there to try and save someone. And this is where you have to earn caution and go through your procedures and to ensure that we are making the right decision here. Let's take, for instance, Andy, a burning house. A burning house with relatives inside of there or a child inside of there, you as the individual would just want to rush in there regardless of the flames, regardless of the extent, to save this human life. You will. And you will see fire services will probably be holding you back, other people holding you back. No, because what they're saying here now, another life can be lost because of the extent of what is taking place in that accident, that situation, that incident. And the same thing with a car accident or whatever, there's a desire to want to save life. That's just how we are built up. And we can understand on behalf of the relatives and those are concerned. We can also understand on behalf of PARIA, trying to caution and to go through the processes. But I just want us to speak on one thing. The underpinning of all of this, when you have situations like this, it's called the concept of the 3 S's, just for simplified terms. The concept of the 3 S's in incident command management or incident command systems is 1, safety of self, safety of crew, safety of mission. And it goes literally in that sequence. Safety of self, self-preservation, your first line of defense. Safety of your crew, your other members. And last and most importantly, safety of the mission. How can we save the mission? But first and foremost, save self, save crew, then save mission. That's important. So understanding what is taking place here, understanding that the fact-finding sort of intrusive investigative commission of inquiry is in full throttle. I'm just making a recommendation because I'm speaking to Andy Johnson.
Yeah.
I'm not speaking to the Commissioner of Inquiry, and I can't. But maybe at this point, Andy, a sort of consideration will have to be made regarding recommendations for something known as forensic engineering. Forensic engineering is a process that gives a meticulous approach, start to stop, cradle to grave, when something breaks and causes catastrophic sort of results, be it a bridge breaking down, a road collapses, a building collapses, or something engineeringly in the oil and gas sector breaks and there's a major spill or whatever. You'd go through forensic engineering. And an important aspect in forensic engineering conducted by certified experts, internationally certified experts, would be something known as the reconstruction of accidents. And I strongly recommend a reconstruction of the accident through a forensic engineering process that can identify what went wrong, when did it go wrong, and how can this be avoided?
How to prevent a reoccurrence of this?
Yeah, but not just based on pen to paper because X said this and Y said that and this one was whatever and we could have done this and done. No. Forensic engineering now, let us go back in the water. Let us get trapped back. You put systems to represent a body being trapped again in the chamber. What went wrong and when did it happen? That's the meticulous approach of forensic engineering so that you could understand this is where it broke, this is what happened, so you can build your system with resilience to avoid reoccurrences.
How do you do that in a situation like this? So you recreate a situation to see...
You recreate actually go and recreate the accident, but not this time you're using sort of like what we'll call, I wouldn't say dummies, but bodies are in the water, yes, but you're carrying through the process because at this point you wanted to test the system. And I don't have all of the details this morning, but it's important to understand the concept. And the concept is forensic engineering, and the process is reconstructing the accident to see exactly where it pinged, exactly where what happened. And then you're able to, it helps in making the decisions for, as I said, building that sort of resilience going forward.
Yeah. I want to come to a point at which Mr. Ramadao, somebody who I like a lot, but I suppose one sees one's mission in this sometimes differently from how others will see it. And he's asking Mr. Piper at one point, are you going to cry here today? Are you another crybaby? To what extent that? Kind of unemotional?
Well, you have to understand the posture from which Mr. Ramadao is speaking, and he's representing the interest and the hearts of the loved ones, and he's pointing fingers, he's asking questions, and he wants to probe and to find out because he's expecting to see a response that shows some sort of remorse and emotionally. So he's working with the witness to break him basically, or to get him to a point of understanding how these people are feeling. Have you at one time put yourself in the shoes of the relatives? Have you at one time put yourself in the shoes of the loved ones? So that is a process, what we are seeing. And people use different styles and techniques in their processes. And as I said, they are all legal experts. So I would not really delve. I will walk on eggshells, to be quite truthful. What I would say, however, is that we must remember that it's a fact-finding mission. And we must remember that there are three key elements of that commission of inquiry. One, have we identified the terms of reference? I hope we did. What were the clearly defined objectives of this commission of inquiry once it's completed? And what is the stipulated timeline that we expect a report? And in this report, strong recommendations of moving forward. Sometimes those recommendations can either be prosecutorial in nature, or they can be representing infrastructural and policy introductions.
At this point, you have a sense of what it would be, how you see thus far. It's too early to sort of speculate on what kind
No,
of
I
recommendations
think
would be made?
one could start to read. Definitely, there are going to be some policy type recommendations on how we do business going forward, and there are going to be some recommendations, especially along the three S's, as I spoke about: safety of self, safety of crew, safety of mission, and who are going to be in future recruited or, as I would say, outsourced to perform certain high-risk duties outside there, not only in Paria, but in entire oil and gas in Trinidad and Tobago, and even some of our regional partners who are looking on, because when something happens home with your neighbor, you got to wet your house. If your neighbor house is on fire, we say in the old days, wet yours. So basically putting things in place to alleviate that. You see, one of the key things about it, when you have people working in confined spaces, be it underwater, be it above water, be it online, where you have situations where there are high vulnerabilities, high risks, high threats, you must always, a major, what I'll call an integral part of incident command systems is drills and exercises. You must conduct drills, you must conduct exercises, you must have something called an emergency response kit, which is like an emergency response capability and capacity, not literally a bag as a kit. And therefore, that has to be prepared and rechecked. And I came from an aviation environment. I was a member of an air crew, and we would have to constantly check our life raft, check our life jackets, check emergency systems in the aircraft all the time, go through the drills. You never stop going through the drills and the exercises, because the day that something happens, you want to know that your resources, your capacity, your training, your capability, your emergency response kit had what is called the readiness to support the level of emergency. And that's from the most trivial of matters to the most, what we call critical of matters. And therefore, we are hearing the buzzword of incident command, and I'm advocating strongly as an expert. Incident command systems, incident command management has a lot to do with drills and exercises. If we have people operating in highly confined areas, high threat areas where there's risk and vulnerability, we have to be able to conduct drills and exercises, not only for infrastructure breaks or shutdowns in the mechanical aspect of it, but for loss of life, or for life, threat to life, those type of responses. So if we had divers down, we would have had to have a response and a capability and a response aspect of how to treat with a what if something occurs concerning the life, limb, or even the property of the people that we had under the water.
All right, so as terminal operations manager on that occasion, Mr. Piper would have been the incident commander in your phrasing of it on this incident?
Yeah, well, depending on the type of incident, depending on where it is taking place, incident commanders in a good operating system could all shift. One day it's Andy, tomorrow it's Gavin, depending on what is taking place. Yes, he would have had an integral role to play regarding the incident command, and it is also involved with a team. For instance, a support aspect of experts, people who come in to support the decision making. So we have informed decision making, different layers, for instance, observations and layers. And a key to all of this is a crisis, or what you call a critical thinking aspect. But a crisis management center supports the incident command system. So I'm hoping that in future there will be recommendations that each one of these platforms outside there, in the oil and gas, the energy sector, the industrial sector, law enforcement in Trinidad and Tobago, we understand the operationalizing of a crisis management center and what gives you situational awareness. Not just waiting for phone calls to come in or someone to send a picture, or we're waiting on the bureaucracy process of a decision to be made. Situational awareness is real-time information is presented to support, assist, and accelerate the decision-making process. So very, very important, and I'm saying this, amplified in the volume for the right ears to hear, is the establishment of crisis management centers that can produce situational awareness, that can support accelerated decision-making processes.
As if you're saying that a sort of a new rule book has to be written about how to treat with matters such as this, and we should take that away as a definite given from this incident?
Not necessarily a new rule book, but yes, there are some key takeaways on all this, and maybe adjust our SOPs and how we approach things, or amend or add annexes, or even different clauses, but we have to look at it now in such a way that whatever is being decided or comes out of this has to be put into some sort of operations manual for the future operations of resilience in our energy sector, our industrial sector, and some of the key other sectors where we have high-risk events taking place.
Yeah. Every time I asked myself that question, my answer was no. I would not want anybody to be so reckless with my son's life. Do you understand what I'm saying? This is Mr. Piper talking to his questioners about the decision, the central decision here was to send this gentleman in back. He wanted to go back in, and under that, the headline says the divers were too emotional for rescue. So that was one of the first pieces of the narrative that came out, that there were those who were insisting, clamoring that some of them wanted to go in, and that call had to be made. Mr. Piper is saying that they were just too emotional at that point to risk sending them in, which would have sent up, in his estimation, the casualties, and he didn't want it to be the person taking that position or taking that decision.
Yeah, we heard his utterances, and then basically he was making that statement after, assumingly, he would have done an assessment, or there would have been contributions of information gathering that provided an assessment for a decision to be made. That is how the cycle works. That's basically how the chain goes. So it is, in my opinion, humble opinion, it is that when he made that statement, it would have been a statement based on an assessment. It is very key to understand that that divers that operate in those sort of sectors are trained and certified to do certain type of jobs underwater. Rescue divers that retrieve bodies and what we call critical equipment and that type of stuff, it's two different type of approaches. Some people are capable of being the underwater expert diver who can assist, do work, maintenance work or whatever, corrective aspects of diving underwater in certain areas, certain sectors. But a rescue diver who retrieves, some people at what you call dually trained, can do both. Most of the times, it's a specific, what I'll call a specialist, subject matter expert type of specialization type of diver that actually does rescue diving and retrieval. And therefore, I heard, I stand to be corrected, that we did not have the capability to execute such a rescue. I think I heard that somewhere along the lines. I'm not too sure if it's there in black and white. It was actually
so that's a subspecialty in diving, rescue efforts. That's a subspecialty is what you're saying. And not every diver is trained to do that.
Yeah, but I'm saying that to say, Andy, that if you have people underwater in a specific sector that is high risk, then you have to have rescue divers or a rescue crew immediately always on standby with a what-if scenario existing.
And that doesn't appear to have been the case here.
It doesn't appear to be that way, and that is hopefully one of the lines or the clauses and the recommendations that we will see going forward.
I know this is not a question necessarily for your area of competence per se, but I'll ask anyway. One of the early headlines coming out of this inquiry was the widow of one of these unfortunate gentlemen. She said what she wants was justice, and my question is, what does justice look like in a case like this?
Yeah, and I think she would have used justice based on what people have been talking to and saying, but what she really wants is questions answered. And if I was to be in the shoes of the loved ones, the widows, those who would have lost co-workers, I want questions answered. Because before the Commission of Inquiry, even now, maybe a lot of the questions are not being answered to satisfy the emotional trauma that has been experienced by these loved ones and co-workers. So I think I would just shift the word of justice apart, and I would say everyone, including Trinidad and Tobago, wants the questions answered.
And you think how sanguine are you that we will get the proper answers and we will take the decisions, whoever has to take the decisions, to prevent as far as is possible a repeat of this kind of thing?
Yeah, well, to be quite truthful, I'm quite confident in the team, and the chairman, Mr. Lynch, is leading a good team. He has his hands on it, or at least he has taken charge of the room, and therefore, apart from what we see with the witnesses and those who are doing the questioning, the after effect, sitting down now and in conference and putting together the information to come up with the recommendations, I trust that I'm quite confident that we should get some very meaningful, what I call applicable solution-based recommendations that can only assist or help develop the way we do business going forward in Trinidad and Tobago. So I can be quoted on this. I have confidence in Mr. Lynch and his team, and I have confidence in his expertise and how he's leading this aspect of the commission. Okay, we're seeing some little breaks in the system, maybe as we talked earlier about how witnesses are being questioned and how they're being charged by those who are posing the questions. But in light of all of that, I have confidence that we should come out with some very workable solutions here that can only be for the development of our country and to avoid a reoccurrence of an incident of this nature.
Our profound thanks to you for that, Sir Commander Gavin Huey. Thank you very much.
Andy, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. Do have a good day.
You're very welcome. You too. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we take a quick look around the region before we get to our next guest, Mr. Kenrick Richardson. Stay with us. This is AM Prime on a brand new morning. A moment from now, we'll be talking with Mr. Kenrick Richardson. His story was carried in an edition of the Newsday newspaper a couple of days ago. The headline on one page says, "The U.S. prison changed my life," and the other says, "Prison programs are essential to solve crime in Trinidad and Tobago." We'll get to him moments from now. But first, let's take a quick look around the region. In this case, Grenada. Mail from Grenada faces interruption, but it is anticipated that this will be short-lived. We have a report on that from the Grenada Broadcasting Network. Let's take a look.
Marketing Communications Customer Relations Officer at the Grenada Postal Corporation, Ms. Janelle Bowen, has confirmed that its mail delivery service to Canada and the Caribbean for the Christmas season has been suspended. However, the corporation's marketing department is anticipating a return of the service by mid-January 2023.
Fortunately, we have to have our mail service for the Caribbean and Canada on hold. This is due to areas are unable to take the mail due to the volume that they currently have, being that their primary customers are passengers. They have to move the passenger and the passenger's luggage first. So they cannot guarantee that they could take the mail, therefore we place it on hold until further notice.
Bowen says mail delivery service to the Caribbean and Canada was a guaranteed service offered by Liat to the GPC before the airline experienced its challenges in 2020. Although Liat has resumed limited flights to Grenada, it is unable to continue the mail carrying and delivery service.
Well, we're very much grateful to American Airlines for facilitating the movement of mail for us to the Caribbean and Canada, because as you know, we don't have anyone really trafficking through the Caribbean at the moment. Well, we're estimating by mid-January, that's when peak season should come down, that everything should be back to normal. That doesn't mean that we may not be able to start before, but that's the time where we're definitely sure that things should be back to normal by mid-January.
Bowen apologizes for this interruption, which is beyond their control.
Well, yeah, we do have other shipments going through right about now. Around this particular time, people like to send a touch of home to family members. And, you know, people have probably asked them to send probably a cake or even a ham, you know, just these little things, the spices and so on. So they try to ship it out for them during the season and so on, or whatever other little knickknacks for the holidays. And, of course, we do have the small businesses that utilize us as well to move their products. So that is a hindrance for them at the moment as well.
She added that mail from Grenada to the affected countries must first go to the USA before it reaches its final intended destination. It was also explained that mail from the UK will also be delayed because of planned industrial action, which can span into the new year. The GPC's suspension of its service, it will mean customers now have to find a temporary alternative to do business.
All right, back inside now. This is a fascinating story. It was written by Debbie Jacob, who has a specialty in doing these things. This headline and on the first part of it is the Newsday, carried on December 14th, a couple of days ago. U.S. prisons saved my life. And the other headline, the second part of the story, is an advocacy for prison programs in Trinidad and Tobago. He says that will help the crime situation. His name is Kenrick Richardson. Let me just quote some of what he is saying in this piece here. I didn't have a father, but I'm not blaming that for my life in crime. My mom had 11 of us. None of them was a vagabond but me. They all made something of their lives. And he says later on, my mom was a motivator. She loved me and always said, Kenrick, you have a piece of my heart. But in the 60s, I rejected everything because this is what I believed you were supposed to do. I rejected education, but you need education to understand what people are trying to say. I only went because my mom wanted me up there. He's talking about having decided to go to the United States. It wasn't my decision. When I left, I took Trinidad with me. I didn't leave Trinidad to change. But they don't play up there. They have prison for you, and there's a lot more rich narrative you talk about here. Kenrick Richardson, good to see you, my friend.
Thank you very much. Good to be here, too.
All right, so you say that you acknowledge that you don't blame the absence of a father for anything. You say my mom had 11 of us, and none of them was a vagabond but me. You seem as though you set out to be a troublemaker, and you relished some of that going in, right? Correct?
Yes, yes.
So I rejected everything because that is what I believe you were supposed to do. I rejected education, but you need education to understand what people are trying to say. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, back in the days, in the 60s where I grew up in Belmont, there was the Black Power movement around that time. And some individuals there, they basically were telling us that the education, they call it the white man education.
Brainwash education.
Brainwash education, and you had to reject that. So.
And you did that.
And I did that. So by rejecting that, I reject the most essential thing in my life. So whereas I was thinking that I'm doing something that is beneficial, it really brought me down.
Right. And then your mother migrated, and then she sent for you. You didn't really want to go, but you went.
Right. At that time, I had dreadlocks and everything else. So as I said, I rejected the system. So New York, we used to call it Boo York back in that time. So no one wants to go there.
Yeah.
But after when things get real tough, and then I started to see moms coming back, and whoever coming back looking all nice and everything else, and I realized
nice clothes and so on,
nice clothes and
platform shoes and so on.
Food, nice and nice accent, little American accent.
Yeah.
And then I'm down here, I'm saying I'm broke, things going, and when you ask for something, first thing they will tell you, well, come on up.
Yeah. And there were 11 of you, and your mother took all of you one by one to the States.
One by one up there.
Yeah.
One migrated first. My pops sent for one.
Yeah.
And then she now sent for moms, and then moms sent for everyone else.
Yeah. But you said you went with a certain kind of mindset.
Right. Well, as I have learned afterwards, that I took Belmont with me and my mess with me, in opposed to leaving it here and going to the United States.
Well, one part of Belmont, because there are Belmont people who would say, well, you're maligning our place because so much good has come out of Belmont. And so, all right,
very
good.
You're very good. But the part that, well, me as an individual, right, and the other people who I was amongst, friends. Guys always say friends will lead you and they don't really bring you back, right? And the environment that I grew up in with the people then, everyone was like more or less Black Power oriented. So, and seeing the white man as some evil force and all that. So with that, I took that with me to the white man country, so to speak. You can't do that. You have to leave all this negativity right there because you're going to make something of yourself. Yeah. To be a better person.
Yeah, and that was in 1982, right? You said, within 3 years, I was out in the street doing drugs, selling drugs, robbing people. For my first arrest, I was charged with 13 felonies, and I went to trial for all of them.
Well, actually, it wasn't even 3 years later. It was almost immediately when I get to the United States, almost the next day when I came out to see the place. Wow. To have Trinidadians, to have Jamaicans, and remember I'm into smoking weed and all this stuff. So it was easy for me to just fall in, and I adapt right away. Right away, because remember, you're from Belmont, you're from the ghetto, from town. So you go to America and you realize that, hey, this is how it is. It have ghetto, you have tongue, the same way up there.
And you met guys you knew from Belmont or parts of Port of Spain, and,
Right.
and so you hooked up with
Right.
them and so
Some
on.
from Belmont and Trini. So long as you're from Trinidad, the point you took with the Trinidad crew is.
Yeah, and you were doing things, but your mother said, I know you didn't do this. And of course, I lied and said I didn't, so as not to disappoint her. But you spent 5 years in prison for that first
Right.
infraction.
Yeah, but what happened, Mr. Johnson, is this. We grew up in the era where we respect the elders. So we will do things and your moms will never know. Your mom is always say, well, you know, he's a good guy. She may have a good feeling that you're doing something wrong, but you know, if she don't see it, you know, some moms like to deny. And I will think that she enabled me to by not really believing that Kenrick could be.
And you didn't show that side of you to her, so she didn't have a frame of reference to say, well, you know, to acknowledge even to herself that you were doing these things.
Right. Now remember, you remember, parents just know the children to an extent, right? So she probably knew that Kenrick is not.
You're not perfect.
Yeah, you're not perfect, but all these things, Kenrick is not doing these things because she's not seeing it.
Yeah.
And I'm always helpful. I always moms. I was a mommy's boy.
Yeah. So you spent 5 years in prison, and you say, you know, it's fascinating. You say, I did programs, but I faked it to make it, so to speak. What do you mean?
Yeah, that was very profound. What happened when they go into the system, in the correctional system, they call it over there, in opposed to the penal system, right? That they usually give you a series of things to do while you're incarcerated. Because outside in the United States, as I always, when I speak to people in Trinidad and explain them about the sentencing structure here, right? The sentencing structure in Trinidad, they give you a determinate sentence, meaning they will give you 5 years. So when you do your 5 years and you come out, you could do whatever you want to do. In opposed to the United States would not give you 5 years. They will give you 5 to 15 years. So now they're telling you, no, well, you have 5 years minimum, but you have 15 years maximum. So they send you to the prison system with 5 years, and they give you a long list of things that they want you to do within the 5 years if you want to get out in 5 years.
Yeah. If not, they could extend that.
They could extend the time. So you could go up until you do 10 years, and then there's something called conditional release.
So what does faking it mean in that situation like that?
Right. Meaning that the programs that they designate me to do, so to speak, right? I did it. I behaved myself, you know, tried to stay out of trouble. I mean, I get locked up in there many, many times. However, but I try to keep it to the minimum.
For what kind of things? What you
Like, you know, especially threats against the police, maybe a little one or two fighting with some inmates. But it used to be mostly disobedience against the system, society. Now, I was always a disobedient person. So it was difficult to keep me really in tune. But remember, I know that I have, on the first arrest, right, I get charged with 13 felonies. Actually, the newspapers say that this guy is suspected of doing over 100 of crime. It's in the newspapers in the United States. If you Google it really carefully, you will see all of these things.
New York Post and so on, New York Daily News and
Long Island,
Okay.
Long Island Newsday.
Okay, all right.
And so what happened is that, but they charged me with 13 counts, right? 13 felonies. Now, moms, you know, when moms come visiting me, you know, she's like, I know you didn't do this thing, Kenrick, because she's like, wow, some of these robberies and things happen on Christmas Day, Kenrick. I say, moms, you know, I didn't do it, you know. They're accusing me because they didn't get me right. You see, that's another thing too, they didn't get me dead right. They didn't get me doing no crime.
Yeah.
The police, you know, they really beat me up.
So you went along as if you would, you were on the right track, but you had other things in the mind. As you say, you faked it to make it because you wanted to come out, and you said you came out, and 7 months later you took her car to go and put on a robbery. Yeah,
well, that was not that was the intention, but moms didn't know. I really intended was to go look for a job.
Yeah, okay.
But I know I know what was my intention. And then what happened is that after the 5 years, when I came back out, I decided that, well, I know the crack cocaine because I used to use crack before that put me into that line of doing all of these robberies and burglaries and all these things, right? So I decided that it's not good for me. But marijuana is good because remember they're teaching us marijuana was found on King Solomon. Give all that set of mumbo jumbo. That is different now for me. I don't know for other people, right? So what happened is that I'm thinking that when I come back out, I could still use marijuana, forget the cocaine. But the minute I started using the marijuana, within about 2, 3, 4 weeks, with that kind of high,
You went back on the
I
white stuff.
revert right back now to the cocaine. So now, I'm out there again, running up and down, looking good, put on a little size and looking nice and everything else. But the mind is still corrupted.
Yeah.
And then,
And you got picked up and you got sentenced for 6 years. And you said in that period you made a decision.
that time now, because I realized now, first thing I realized that Kenrick, because, I mean, it begs the question of addiction too. Remember, you remember a person do not understand an addict. Only a person might more understand an addict is another addict.
Yes.
Because addiction is really is something that a person who don't use drugs wouldn't understand. A person might say, yeah, but you cannot do it. No, you can't do anything. What happens is that when you take the drug, it's your choice. The minute you pick up the drug, that is your choice.
Yeah.
But after you pick up that, drinking whatever, smoking cigarette, whatever, you see, the first is your choice. Somebody leaded it, your friends invigorate you do it. But then when they get hooked, you know, like the guy who sing the calypso, and if you're hooked, you know, if you hook, you're crook.
Yeah.
You know, because after that is down the road.
Yeah.
So, but they wanted to sentence me. Because my first sentence was 5 to 15 years, and I went to trial, and I lose on 6 counts, but I win 7 counts.
Yeah.
No, I lose 7 counts, and I win 6, right? So they gave me 7, 5 to 15. So that was 35 to 105 years.
Right, so on that third time, that's when you made a decision, you returned to prison, you joined the alcohol and substance abuse treatment program, and that led from one thing to the other. I want to get to the point where you decided to write this book.
Oh, right.
Book,
Okay.
what you call it?
Sword of the Spirit.
Sword of the Spirit.
All right, that's a very good. No, that happened when I was under the immigration custody.
Yeah.
Well, after the first arrest and everything else, immigration had a little, they wanted to see me. But when I finished do the 5 years in 1991, then they sent a letter to the prison and say, well, we don't have no interest in him, right? So they give me a shot. So I get out in 1991. Now, if I didn't do anything else and get to work and do everything else, everything would be fine. But I went back to the crime. So eventually they deported me in 1996. That was my first deportation. And I came down to Trinidad.
And they revoke your status and all
Right, they
that.
took my green card and everything else. And they shipped me out. Well, I had hearings and everything else. I was doing, that was in my first deportation was in 1996, right? But in 1994, they had ordered me deported. But I was already working, I was doing the thing, because I got out of prison in 94, looking nice, and, I got married and everything else, and doing the thing. But because of that, immigration said they were trying to contact me about the intended deportation, which I could have appealed, but I clean forgot that. So they picked me up in 96 on an unrelated charge. In 96, I got charged, and I beat the charge, right? I got arrested in 96 for unrelated crime. And I went to the grand jury, and I beat that charge.
But did you commit the crime?
No, I didn't know. I didn't commit the crime.
Okay.
So, but when we went to the grand jury, because I told them I'm going to trial with this.
All right.
So when we went to the grand jury released me. So now immigration, and it was in the papers, my thing like it always happens to get into the
So
paper.
you made the news a lot.
Right, so immigration knew where I was at, in Nassau County Correctional Facility. So when they released me, immigration picked me up, and they sent me down home in 96. Came home, had a good time, but I remember I still had my green card on me, with me, the green card, but remember it's no longer valid,
Yeah.
but I still have it. So knowing me again, always under the fraud and that kind of stuff, I wiggled my way with the green card, get to Canada, and I went through, across the border, and I went back over to the United States. Spent about a good 2 years doing everything else. Had a little problem, probably a little personal, domestic problem. And immigration get to find out that I'm up there. Someone probably told them that, this guy, he's up here.
And they came back for you.
Right, so they came again, and they arrested me, and they sent me down again. That was in 2000. I think it was around November month, because I spent like 3 months. it probably was a little later on in 2001. But when I went back in 2001, when I was crossing the border now to get back into Canada again for the second time, I get arrested on the train. Again, someone told them that I was in Canada intending to come back to the United States, because when they were checking documentation on the train and everything else.
So at what point you made the break and you decided, well, this is it, and I'm going to change my life around and so on? Because you talk here about the essentials of programs in the prison. You wrote this book.
Yes, well, I was getting to that point there because it's kind of tricky to get up to there, right? Because remember, it's immigration. I was in immigration custody, so I did finish all my criminal activities in 1994. Now I get arrested in 1996, which was not, as I said, I beat it at the grand jury because I was not really involved in that. But based probably on my past and in the area that I live in Long Island, that area, these people here, they don't play. Any little thing they pick you up and want to incarcerate you. What happened is that, but when I was in immigration custody in 2001, when I get caught crossing the border, now immigration arrested me on the train. So while I get into I was in a federal penitentiary at Batavia, I met this Caucasian person. Of all people, remember, I'm a type of person who, like, as I said, I grew up in the environment where these people and them stay here, I stay on this side.
Yeah. So
God sent this person to me then. I'm told you the same, I came in one evening and the next day, this man disappeared to me. He's American, but it is a federal joint. So they have the Americans, they have all the deportees, all the immigrants, everybody in the same, is a federal lockup. And he came to me and he asked me, he just said to me that he was expecting me. So, expecting me, at that point I'm looking at him like, yo, you know, you looking for war, that is fight. You're expecting me, what do you think it is? He said, no, I'm not talking like that. I'm not talking in that way. And he told me I have a work to do for God. And I'm going back home to my country. I said, mister, I'm being charged for re-entry after deportation twice. They said, I'm going to get 5 years. He said, you're not going to get no 5 years. You're going back to your country. When you get back there, you have a work to do for God. Right? I was like, okay, I'm trying to figure out. All right, you know, and we spent about 2-3 weeks in that facility because I spent 19 months there. But we spent about 2-3 weeks with the guy back and forward. It was funny enough that everyone in the facility, like, he knows the business. And if you ask somebody, oh, you know, what is he in here for? No one knows. It's like if sometimes, like that person, like, you just, I won't say scared, but like you're very apprehensive to ask him his personal business, but he's not.
So at what point you realized that he was onto something? At what point it hit you that he was correct?
Right. After he left, in about 3 weeks' time, they had a little movement of people, and he was one of the people who they moved to another facility. Now, he didn't come and knock on my door and say, hey, Kenrick or Richardson, you know, I'm leaving. Right?
I would ask you to hold your point. We will take a break.
Yes.
We'll get back on the other side of this. Stay with us. This fascinating discussion with Kenrick Richardson. We're coming back.
Okay.
All right, welcome back to the program. Let's just tell you, in a little while, we'll be talking with Rishi Maharaj, a disclosure advocate, about the question of the firearms users license report, why it should be at least be released in the parliament. There are people who are against that. But we'll get to that, but we continue our discussion here with Mr. Richardson, Kenrick Richardson. Let me quote again from this piece here, this fabulous story. I never for 1 minute believed I would be here. My mind is still in New York. I love New York. It's the land of opportunity. New York didn't do anything to me. I did things to New York. You see also, you have to stand up for on your own 2 feet. People are right when they say friends carry you, but they don't bring you back. I was such a follower when I was young. Through my trials and tribulations, I learned patience, perseverance, and tolerance. I just come to the point where you said that you saw the man who came and told you had work to do and you had work to do for God. He didn't know you, didn't know him, and so on. But at what point you began to realize that what he was saying was messianic, as they say?
Right. Well, I just call him the angel because he came, he disappeared, as the scriptures say, entertain strangers, whereby some entertain angels unaware, because this man came and just left. After he left, I'm saying, that joker talking about I have work to do for God, a whole dog like me now. What work do I have to do for God? I say, you just talking, because I'm facing 5 years and all this thing, and he tell me that stuff. And I'm just saying, I'm contemplating, and the Spirit just say, write a Bible study course. You read the Bible all these times, and the fact is I read the Bible
You
over
say you read the Bible 56 times.
over 3 dozen times, over the period of incarceration. Because remember, when you're incarcerated, there's nothing else for you to do. You got nowhere to run. Mom used to always say, you got nowhere to run now, Kenrick, because she never know where I'm at. Even though she didn't want me in the prison, she said, at least I know when I go to bed, I know where you're at now. You're in the prison, right? So while being there, and this is something that I wanted to do. I did a lot of courses, Bible courses there with the Salvation Army and Jim Baker and all of these people and them, right? And
Jim Baker.
Jim Baker, and then this other guy who they had dethroned also. He used to go around trying to get prostitutes and stuff. I don't even remember his name. Mm-hmm. But I did Bible studies with all of these people, and I used to get like 95% in all of these courses, right?
With Jimmy Swaggart? Yeah,
Jimmy Swaggart.
Okay.
So I get certificates, diplomas and stuff. I get offers to go to Bible college when I get out, because that's one thing that God...
And you weren't faking it then?
No, because remember, I stopped faking since I get the 3 years, because they was trying to give me 10 more years. Because they say, we're not getting the guy 5 years. It didn't work. So we're going to give him 10. So my mom's get a lawyer and everything else. So we get 3 years, right? So now so I was good with that. So in 94, that was the end of my crime run when I got out in 94. The other times that I get incarcerated is through the immigration.
Right. When
immigration arrests you before they deport you.
That's when you decided to come back home in 94. So you got sent back, right?
In 96.
Again, 96.
So I probably spent about 18 months in immigration custody before
you get sent back.
Before they send back, because remember, they have to keep you there for a while. They don't figure out what they want to do. Then they had to get travel documents from Trinidad. And around that time, most countries ain't giving travel documents to none of the citizens of the country.
Yeah. People who were being sent back.
Yeah, and them countries didn't want to take people back because the deportees was wreaking havoc in the countries. So when they sent me back in 96, and they think that I was down here. When they called them in 2000 saying, hey, we want travel documents for Kendrick Richardson. Kendrick Richardson. Because remember, they don't know that I left.
Yeah, so you're back here 4 years already.
Right, I went through the back and go back. So the Trinidad government do not know that I am not in Trinidad.
Yeah. So when did the turnaround begin?
Right. Well, actually, as I said, the turnaround began in 94. Because when I got out, I got married in 95 and I was doing good. But, however, my past, the immigration consequences came. And when they arrested me in 96, and I would show me up on the news and everything else, and they released me, immigration sent me back home. So from that time, it's back and forward with the immigration, no longer doing any criminal. I was no longer a criminal, because the immigration is not a criminal matter. Immigration is basically like a civil matter.
Yeah.
Immigration can lock you up. If the federal government will come now and give you a re-entry charge, all immigration is there to do.
You'll be held in a detention center.
In a detention center.
That's not a prison.
That's not a prison. Yeah. I mean, you're locked up, you can't get out, but it's not that status.
Yeah. So you came back here and started to do what?
In 2003?
Yeah.
Well, okay, let me get to the point where while I was locked up there now for 19 months, then I wrote Sword of the Spirit. Mm-hmm. And I wrote 6 other books. Ms. Debbie said I wrote 2 books, but I wrote 7 books. I wrote 7 books. I have them all there, right? I wrote the Trinity American Deportee is an autobiography.
Okay, that's your
that's my whole
story.
life story. Yeah. And I got that motivation from, of course, Malcolm X. Alex Haley wrote Malcolm X autobiography. And when you're up in the system, the correctional system, a squad is being kept, they always give you a copy of Malcolm X book. Yeah. Because, we remember he was a terrible guy to stay out in the street, and he went to prison and made something of his life. Yeah. And I more or less did the same. because I went to prison and I get educated in there. I could have read and everything else. I didn't like school in Trinidad. As I said, I was a whole wayward person, right? Yeah. I go through the front door, and when my sister and them leave, I go through the back. I come out the back. But when I get incarcerated, I went to school. I get education. I get my GED. I start to read. Hence the reason why I came now and wrote The Sword of the Spirit. Because I read the Bible, so the Spirit said, write the Bible study course. And funny enough, Mr. Johnson, there was a miraculous event even for me to get the tools, to write inside of the prison system. I ended up getting a job in the law library, right? In the law library in the system, because all my years in there, I learned a lot of law because I was wasting a lot of time.
This
right?
is in New York?
In New York, yeah. I never get incarcerated in Trinidad, thank God. But, I have a voluminous amount of knowledge concerning the American law. And now, with the immigration law, I am like a paralegal when it comes to that. And so
you do that here?
No, I just, I don't do anything. I just try to sell my books and see if I can make a living.
And how is that? How is that going?
It's difficult. It's difficult in Trinidad. Because for one thing first is that I am not a member of any church or congregation. So if I go to a church and I say, well, listen, I have this book.
This is part of my story and it might be able to help you.
Right. First thing they may want to know, well, are you a Pentecostal?
Yeah.
Or
Are you a member? Are you a brother? You're not.
Yes, not. And when I say, well, no, I am just a person who got a message, right, to write this with the information that I have on it. And I'm sure that it's conducive to it would be conducive to the development of the church now, the churches. They're like, yeah, but no one really.
Yeah, I'll tell you something. We have to do an adjournment, and I'll invite you to come back. We have to continue this story. It's too fascinating. But you see that prison programs are essential to solve crime in Trinidad and Tobago. But you don't think. I mean, Debbie Jacob, who wrote this story, who interviewed you, she is one of those who conducts a lot of programs in the prison. What do you think is not enough, or it's not hitting the target, or what is your sense about that kind of transformation that you went through happening in Trinidad and Tobago? To what extent what the success rate is of people going through these walls here, these doors we have? Yes.
Well, as I said, because of this sentencing structure, right? When a person leaves the prison in Trinidad, then they owe the government nothing, so they don't have any incentive to do anything. In the post-United States, as I said, if you do 5 years, you have 10 years on parole. So the parole officer will still dictate your piece for the amount of time that you're on parole. So he will tell you, get a job, stay off the road, don't use drugs, don't do this, and you have to abide by that.
So there are things that are required to fix our prison system, you're saying?
That is a big requirement, and especially with the sentencing. You cannot sentence a person to 2 years. You have to give him 2 to 4 years. Yeah, right. So when he get out, he will have some time, still the government will still have some time over him.
Some jurisdiction for him.
Over him. Instead he just coming out and the first he go cuss the police, he do everything else.
All right, we have to leave it there, my friend. A fascinating story. Kenrick Richardson, the U.S. prison changed my life.
Yes.
Good to see you. We will talk soon.
Thank you very much, Mr. Johnson.
We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, Rishi Maharaj on the question of what to do with the firearms users license report. Stay with us. Welcome back to the program. With us now, Mr. Rishi Maharaj. We describe him as a disclosure advocate. The issue has to do with the firearm users license report. The court blocked it from going to the parliament as the government intends. The government has pushed back on that. The question is, some people are saying that it should be released in the public. What's the issue? The person who is behind it, the former commissioner of police, says he's daring the government to publish it outside of the parliament. It's a kind of a threat. What is the situation? What are the pros and cons of that? We're talking about that now with our friend on these matters, Rishi Maharaj. Good to see you.
Good morning, Andy, and thanks for having me on.
All right, so let's get to it. The latest is that the government wants to well, the government has appealed the decision of the court to lay it in the parliament. And Gary Griffith is saying lay it outside of the parliament. Let's talk about the implications of one or the other.
Right. So I think from what I understand, the government at the time indicated they wanted to lay the executive summary of the FUL report and not the actual report itself, because I believe the current AG will have made a statement early on, I think around September of this year, where he indicated that they were looking at ways to involve other people who were accused in the report and didn't get a chance to, I guess, state their claim or make their case. So the recommendation was that they would, create an avenue for them to be able to hear their side of the story and everything else. But I think the government at this time still wanted to lay the executive summary of it within the parliament. That's something the Prime Minister indicated. And then, of course, Mr. Griffith went to court and got an injunction stating that, listen, you know what, I want the court to stop this from happening, and he was successful. I know the government is appealing right now, but again, this goes to a question of accusations being made against a senior public official, as he was then, misusing office, and a very high senior public officer, and very serious accusations. So the question then is, should there be more, as you mentioned, disclosure or information put out in the public domain in the public interest? Because now we're having a serious media circus going on between both the Prime Minister and the former Commissioner of Police with regards to, should you not? The Commissioner saying, well, as we say in Trinidad, if your man, take it outside and put it out there in the public domain. And then obviously, that may have instances of, questions of whether or not he can now sue because of libel and slander and all these different things. So I guess that's where we are now, where it has now become, for me, a political football.
Yeah, so you're saying that, so it's a kind of a, would you say a kind of a bluff for Mr. Griffith to be calling for it to be released outside? Because if it's released in the parliament, then what comes out of it will be sort of, it will be protected in a kind of way. The government will decide what it wants to become public and what it wants to remain off limits.
Yeah, exactly. I think in terms of the government wanting to lay it in Parliament is obviously the question of, parliamentary privilege, parliamentary, operations of the Parliament being above the judiciary coming to begin to interrogate it. Obviously, there are certain cases where it could happen and cannot happen. So I think in the Prime Minister's thinking, if he can lay the executive summary of the report in Parliament, then it paints a picture to the public, and he's able to control the narrative of exactly, this was a report that was done by a distinguished former judge of the bench, and coming out of it, this is the summary of the question marks with regards to the former Commissioner of Police when he was in the office, and the accusations that happened and the transactions that happened. And it allows the government to paint a certain picture and control the narrative. And I guess Mr. Griffith obviously wants to, because obviously he's now no longer Commissioner of Police. He's obviously now the leader of a political party. So now it's moved away from a question of misconduct in public affairs, a very political boxing match between the government and Mr. Griffith in terms of, where do you want to lay the report, and the accusations made forward. Even if you're not going to lay the full report, it gives the government the leverage to say what they want to do with it and what they don't want to do with it. And I guess he is daring the government, on the other hand, to say, listen, put it in the public domain, let everything be out there, and then allow the public now to make their decision as to what they think the contents of the report says, and it gives them more ammunition. But the government wanting to control the narrative, that's something I guess he's trying to move away from.
All right, and if it's laid in the Parliament, and how will that determine what gets reported and what doesn't get reported? What gets reported is what the government will say about it, as opposed to the report itself being the subject of reporting in the public?
Yeah, I think if the government lays the executive summary, there's the executive summary that will obviously create some kind of, because the executive summary is exactly that, a summary of the events of the report. So it doesn't go into the detail. It goes into the high-level points that it wants to lay out. And again, as the AG would have mentioned in his public utterance, I think in September of this year, questions have been asked as to whether or not natural course of justice took place, because natural justice would say that if I am accused of an event or something, then I should have the ability to have my say and to question the information, the facts that you have, to present a clearer picture. But if it is that I've been accused of something and I have not been, I don't know what I'm accused of, one, or I've not been allowed to give my side of the story, then it skews it in that, your report is not full, in that you didn't get the sides of the other people who were accused, whether it be the former commissioner or other people who may have been part of the incident. So I think the AG, noting that, recommendation was, well, we need to put some mechanisms in place to allow for those parties to have their voices heard and have their say, so we can get a clear picture. But again, not stopping that, we can at least lay the executive summary to at least paint a holistic, at least a picture of what they want to paint, exactly what the major contents of the report are, what may or may not have been done by the commissioner during his tenure. And I think that is something that, Mr. Griffith is trying to move away from, and either block the executive summary through the courts and say, listen, put the whole thing in place, or let's have it more open and transparent, where we can now have our say and have our points of view heard, so that the fuller, more open picture is put out there in the public domain.
And why is that not possible, regardless of what part of it is laid in the parliament? Or is this just a game of, of checkers here? Because it's not as though he doesn't want it to be laid. If he wants it to be laid in public, but he doesn't want it to be laid in the parliament. What is that?
I think it's a chess game. Obviously, it's a chess game that's taking place between, like I said, it's moved away from administrative area of corruption to a political football in terms of who controls the narrative, who controls the shots. Right now, the government has in their possession the report, the full report. Whether or not Mr. Griffith has seen the whole report, I'm not aware if he has. If he hasn't, I'm pretty sure he may have seen it, I hope. And the government now, but obviously that report has not been made public. Yes, there have been quote-unquote leaks to the media of what the substance of the report is saying, but even those leaks just paint a particular picture of what may or may not have occurred. And again, obviously, we know in politics, if you control how the leaks come out and what goes out in public domain, again, it's about controlling the narrative and controlling the picture of what information people get. In marketing, they call it drip content, where you give a little bit, you don't give the full picture, and you try to use that little bit to create a narrative and create a story. And the problem is that we, as the public, we don't know the full picture of what the exact contents. All we've known is being given little tidbits here and there. And at the end of the day, I think something of this magnitude concerning senior public officials or former public officials and the acts that may or may not have taken place needs to be fully publicly ventilated. And I think it goes back to, the way it was handled initially in terms of the initial committee or body or person that was set up to investigate it. I know it stems all the way back to how this whole thing started, an investigative process, and it painted up a political picture from the outgo. So it was never about, administration or dealing with corruption, but painting a political picture and controlling the narrative of the information to gain points one way or the other.
Yeah, and the Prime Minister described it as making disturbing reading. He used that term twice, disturbing reading. Against that, I mean, what prevents it from us making our own assessment as to how disturbing it is then? Why should we be prevented from doing that, making our own assessments of it?
I think it's because of what the AG said in his statement in September, and that accusations were made, and maybe the whole process that went about in doing the investigation was not in keeping with the natural course of investigations, or if you use a court proceeding, in terms of accusations have been made against an individual or individuals of serious misconduct. And obviously, investigations may have been done, evidence may have been presented to the committee or the person who did the initial investigation. But then the other part of the story is that those people who were accused probably were not given their initial ability to contest the contents of the investigation or contents of the allegations made against them, to create a more, open, because I'm pretty sure if this was done in a manner that allowed for full, disclosure on both sides. This is the accusations we have against you. What are your comments on this? So what's your feedback on this? And they were able to give their point of view. Then it would have been a different story. So I think what is causing this political football, and I know the Prime Minister, as you said, is disturbing reading. The question is, what does disturbing mean to him as opposed to everybody else? It goes back to the way I think the whole investigation was done and this whole committee was done, the whole way the report was set up to be done, in that it didn't allow for other parties to give their side of the story. So it was skewed in one manner to only come to one particular outcome, possibly, as opposed to giving a full picture of exactly what went on. I think that is causing the issue with the government not wanting to take the gambit of putting everything out there. It definitely possibly could open them to civil litigation one way or the other.
Yeah, and in the meantime, we have to be sort of guessing then as to accepting what the Prime Minister says as to how disturbing it is.
Yeah, because again, we don't know everything. Unfortunately, we are just at the ebb and fancy of the government in terms of, will the report go out, will it not go out? Little tidbits that will come out through leaks, and well, Andy, in terms of leaks, how these things work, in terms of you get to control what goes out, what doesn't go out. I'm a big fan of this whole show, Yes Minister and Yes Prime Minister, from back in the days. I'm sure you're familiar with the show.
Of course.
And how, this information gets out in the public domain. So again, it's about, the report is in the government's hand. Unfortunately, they control the narrative. And as members of the public, unfortunately, we just have to wait to see exactly what goes out, how it plays out in the end.
And we will do that. We will wait and watch and see and hope that the thing moves forward, the ball moves forward in a way that will be sort of supportive of public right to know. But thank you very much, my friend.
No problem. Sure.
Rishi Maharaj, thank you very much. That will do it for us for this edition of the program. We thank our guests. We thank you for watching. We tell you that you can get in touch with us here, as always, on all our social media platforms. You can send your emails to amprime@WESNCC in half an hour. We'll have news at the top of the hour, followed by today's edition of Talking Point, which and small. But for now, thanks for watching. I'm Andy Johnson. We'll see you tomorrow.